Hi everyone, this is Dr. Juliet Singler, and I'm talking to you today about romantic music. Symphonic and opera selections is what we'll focus on for today. We have 5 composers to look at. It's Beatrix Smetana, Antonin Dvorak, Johannes Brahms, Giacomo Puccini, and Richard Wagner. So these 5 composers are really terrific. You're going to enjoy these selections that you'll be listening to. And each of us tell us a little something different about romantic music. So in the case of Smetana, the selection that you'll be listening to is the Moldau. This is a river near where he lived that he's depicting musically. And what it tells us about romantic music is that nationalism was a very important movement at this time. Nationalism is basically a movement that says we're going to talk about the stories of our nation and our national identity through all of the performing arts. Now, this movement didn't really come across the pond to the United States for about, 50 years it took for us to really take hold of it in the United States. But there were certain composers that were very important in initiating nationalism in the United States. One of them was our next composer, Antonin Dvorak. So his New World Symphony, Symphony number 9, that you'll be listening to, is something that was kind of inspired by his interaction with American culture. And you'll be listening to that and telling me just what in his music was connected with our culture in America. Dvorak was brought over to the United States as kind of a composer in residence to New York. And he was able to come to New York and say, hey, what you need to look at in the United States is your own culture that you hear in songs from spirituals, from Native Americans. This is part of your own native culture in the United States, our kind of like melting pot culture, he said. Don't ignore those things. Even the folk songs that have come over by different immigrant groups from Europe are part of what you should consider to be part of your national story. So he was very inspiring to us. Our next composer, Johannes Brahms, was an exciting symphonic composer, and he was connected to a couple that we already talked about in our last session, Clara Wieck Schumann and her husband, Robert Schumann. They were both very important figures on the scene in the Romantic era, and they kind of mentored Johannes Brahms as he became a very great composer. So you'll be listening to his Symphony number 3 in F minor, which I think you'll really enjoy. When they talk about the 3 Bs in classical music, they're talking about Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms, these 3 German composers who really revolutionized the way that we write and listen to music. So Brahms is part of that triumvirate. Our next composer is one who is near and dear to my heart, Giacomo Puccini, and the work that you'll be listening to is a scene from La Bohème. So Puccini is a master of orchestration, but what he was really terrific at was creating beautiful melodies, songs that so ideally suited the voice and the character that they're portraying. So you're going to listen to this touching scene and tell me what you hear in his music that you like. And I want you to compare him to our next composer, Richard Wagner. Wagner is a German composer. Puccini is an Italian composer. And there's a big difference in the style between those 2 cultures. So Puccini comes from a long line of composers for whom the music was the most important thing. And so in Italian opera, you often find what you call musical numbers. The aria, the recitative, and the aria are sort of like a fixed part of the scene and something that can be excerpted easily and appreciated by itself. Wagner comes from a different school of thought where the drama is the most important thing. So his works are very moving, but it's hard to excerpt the arias because they fit very much in the context of the story and are sometimes not as pleasing to listen to as something like along the likes of what Puccini would compose, where there's a lot of repetition. In Richard Wagner's works, there's not a lot of repetition in the arias, but what there is repetition of are musical motives So you'll find that Wagner uses musical motives very adeptly in order to define a particular character, thought, or idea. And he will bring this musical motive back again later in the work to reactivate your imagination about that person, thought, or idea, and to take you to a new place with that person, thought, or idea. So wonderful treasures to explore, and I'm very interested to hear whether you prefer a composer like Puccini or Wagner. Also, we think of Richard Wagner as kind of the father of film scoring because he was such a magnificent orchestrator. And you're going to see in our discussion question for this week how his scene from the Valkyrie opera, that's part of the Ring cycle that he composed, a group of operas that he composed, has been used in not only in the opera, but in film scoring. I'll talk more about that later. Thank you. Have a great week.